The land of Israel groaned under the weight of its suffering. For 7 long years the Midianites had plundered their fields and stolen their livestock, leaving nothing but devastation in their wake. These nomadic warriors were a relentless scourge, reducing the Israelites to trembling shadows, hiding in fear. Fear was a constant companion. Their crops were destroyed, and their storehouses lay empty, stripped of all sustenance. The once vibrant nation was on its knees, driven to desperation and despair, their spirits broken. A cry for help rose from the hearts of the oppressed, a plea for deliverance that echoed through their ravaged land, reaching up to the heavens. The Israelites hid in caves and mountain strongholds, seeking refuge from their tormentors, hoping for a miracle. They had forgotten the strength of their forefathers, the God who had parted the Red Sea and delivered them from slavery in Egypt. Their faith had dwindled, replaced by fear and despair, as they faced an uncertain future. The future seemed bleak, a never-ending cycle of oppression and misery, with no end in sight. Hope, like a flickering candle in the wind, threatened to be extinguished, leaving them in darkness. It was in these darkest of times that God heard their cries, their pleas for mercy. He saw their suffering, felt their pain, and knew their heart's desire for liberation from their oppressors. He would not abandon his chosen people, for his love and compassion were boundless. He would raise up a deliverer, an unlikely hero who would embody courage and faith, a man named Gideon, destined to lead his people to freedom. Gideon was not a warrior, not a king, not a man of noble birth. He was a farmer, the son of Joash, from the smallest clan of Manasseh. He threshed wheat, not in the open fields, but in a winepress, hidden from the watchful eyes of the Midianites. He was an ordinary man living in extraordinary times. One day as Gideon worked, an angel of the Lord appeared before him. "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior," the angel proclaimed. Gideon, taken aback, could only stare in disbelief. "Pardon me, my lord," he stammered, "but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us?" Doubt and fear colored his words. He saw himself as weak, insignificant, incapable of such a task. But God saw something more in Gideon. He saw a heart that yearned for justice, a spirit that, though hidden, still held a spark of faith. "Go in the strength you have," the angel urged, "and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" These words ignited a flicker of hope in Gideon's heart, a glimmer of what could be. He was being called upon, chosen for a purpose far greater than himself. Though he felt unworthy and ill-equipped, Gideon began to understand that his strength lay not in his own abilities but in his faith and obedience to God's call. This realization marked the beginning of his transformation from a humble farmer to a leader of his people. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but Gideon was no longer alone. He had the promise of divine guidance and the courage to face whatever lay ahead. Doubt, however, is a persistent foe. Gideon, wrestling with the enormity of the task before him, sought reassurance. He asked for a sign, a confirmation of God's calling. He laid out a fleece on the threshing floor, a simple request with a profound implication. "If you will save Israel by my hand as you have promised," he pleaded, "let the fleece be covered with dew in the morning, but let the ground be dry." The next morning, Gideon's heart pounded as he approached the fleece. It was drenched in dew, while the ground around it was dry as dust. He had his sign, a tangible manifestation of God's power. Yet, doubt still lingered. He asked for another sign, this time reversing the conditions. Again, God answered. The ground was covered in dew, but the fleece remained dry. Gideon could no longer deny his calling. He was God's chosen instrument, flawed, yet faithful. Empowered by these divine confirmations, Gideon prepared for battle. His first mission was a symbolic one, a direct challenge to the Midianite god, Baal. Under the cover of darkness, Gideon, accompanied by 10 of his servants, tore down the altar of Baal that his father had built. He then built an altar to the Lord and with a boldness that surprised even himself, sacrificed a bull from his father's herd. This act of defiance was a turning point. It was a declaration of war, a public proclamation of Gideon's allegiance to the God of Israel. The news spread like wildfire, igniting a spark of hope in the hearts of the Israelites. They began to rally around Gideon, their spirits rekindled by his courage and faith. Word of Gideon's actions reached the Midianites, who, enraged, prepared for a counterattack. They gathered in the valley of Jezreel, a vast horde that stretched as far as the eye could see. Facing them, Gideon assembled the Israelite army, men from the tribes of Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, all answering the call to arms. Yet, even as the armies gathered, fear gnawed at Gideon's heart. The sheer number of the Midianites was overwhelming. He was but one man, leading a force that seemed insignificant in the face of such a formidable enemy. Once again he turned to God, seeking reassurance, a sign that he was on the right path. Gideon, desperate for confirmation, presented another fleece before the Lord. "If you will save Israel by my hand as you have promised," he prayed, "see, I am laying a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece only, and it is dry on all the ground, then I shall know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said." This request was not merely a test of God's power, but a reflection of Gideon's own struggle with doubt and fear. He needed to be absolutely certain, his faith bolstered for the daunting task ahead, and once again God, in his infinite patience and mercy, answered Gideon's plea. The next morning, the fleece was wet with dew, while the ground around it was completely dry. Gideon's faith was strengthened, his resolve solidified. He was ready to face the Midianite horde, not with a vast army, but with the unwavering certainty that God was on his side. The Israelite army, though bolstered by their faith in Gideon and the God he served, was still vastly outnumbered. 32,000 strong they stood, yet the Midianite army seemed to stretch as far as the eye could see. It was then that God spoke to Gideon. "You have too many men," he declared. "I do not want all these men to fight, or they will boast, 'We won the battle by our own strength and ability.' Take them down to the water, and I will test them for you there." Gideon, obedient as ever, led his army down to the water. There, God instructed him to separate the men based on how they drank. Those who lapped the water like dogs, showing caution and alertness, were set aside. The rest, who drank casually, were sent home. In the end, only 300 men remained, a minuscule force compared to the Midianite horde. The stage was set for an improbable victory. Gideon, armed with unshakable faith and a divinely appointed strategy, divided his 300 men into 3 companies. Each man carried a trumpet and a clay jar, inside which a burning torch was hidden. As darkness fell upon the valley of Jezreel, they silently approached the Midianite camp. At Gideon's signal, the Israelites smashed their jars, the sound echoing through the night. They blew their trumpets and shouted, "For the Lord and for Gideon!" The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The Midianites, startled from their sleep, panicked. The darkness, once their ally, now amplified their fear. They turned their swords on each other in the confusion. The sound of battle filled the air. Cries of terror mingled with the clash of steel. The earth trembled under the weight of the rout. The Midianites, their ranks shattered, fled in terror. Gideon and his small band of warriors pursued them relentlessly, their victory assured by the hand of God. The victory over the Midianites was complete, a resounding triumph that echoed through the ages. The Israelites, inspired by Gideon's unwavering faith and obedience, had witnessed a miracle that would be recounted for generations. They had seen with their own eyes that God's power is not found in numbers, but in faith, not in human strength, but in divine intervention. It was a lesson etched into their hearts. In their gratitude and admiration, they offered to make Gideon their king, to establish a dynasty in his name, believing he was the chosen one. But Gideon, wise and humble, refused the offer, understanding the true source of their victory. "I will not rule over you," he declared with conviction, "nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you," he proclaimed, pointing to the heavens, reaffirming their faith in divine leadership. Gideon's story, however, does not end on a triumphant note, but takes a somber turn. In his later years, he made a decision that would have tragic consequences for his people and his legacy. He fashioned an ephod from the spoils of war, an object meant to be a reminder of God's deliverance and their miraculous victory. But the Israelites, prone to straying from the path of righteousness, began to worship the ephod, turning it into an idol, forgetting the true source of their strength. Gideon's own family fell into idolatry, and the cycle of sin and redemption continued, casting a shadow over his legacy. Gideon's life, with its moments of extraordinary courage and faith as well as its tragic missteps, serves as a timeless reminder of the complexities of human nature. It teaches us that true strength lies not in ourselves but in our dependence on God, a lesson that remains relevant across the ages. It reminds us that victory is assured when we place our trust in His unwavering hand, and that faith can move mountains, and it cautions us against the seductive lure of pride and idolatry, urging us to remain ever vigilant in our faith, lest we repeat the mistakes of the past.
If you enjoyed this video, please like it, leave a comment, and if you are not subscribed, subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell to not miss any videos like this one.